Welcome to the first EOS meetup in Austin. Thanks for coming. We have two wonderful guests with us tonight, so I'm really happy you guys all came. First, I just want to quickly mention about myself. My name is James Velez. I'm just a dude. I'm just a guy who likes blockchain. My views don't represent the views of Block.one, creators of EOS. I'm not employed by them or anything, but I am a fan of their technology, and I'm really excited for what they have to offer. And I hope that we can get to know each other here in our community, our EOS community, and here in Austin. And for those who don't know much about the software, I hope that we can inform you about the EOS blockchain and within our group, help each other learn as well. First off, what is EOS? So EOS is a smart contract platform, blockchain platform that is scalable. It doesn't require fees for end users. It has unique account and security features, and it's designed with community governance in mind. These topics might seem a little vague for some of you, but we're going to cover them in more detail further along in this meetup. Another thing I want to mention is that the EOS, there's a lot of people calling it EOS, but the true name of it is EOS.io. And we're trying to steer toward calling it EOS.io instead of EOS. EOS.io is the platform. EOS can still be referred to as the currency. There's also an EOS lip balm. We don't want people to get confused. So from here on forward, we're going to call it, I'm going to refer to it as EOS.io. So I have a little poll here. Just want to kind of get an idea of the audience here. Who here knows what blockchain is? Yeah, that's what I figured, most of you. Who here is a software developer? Okay, yeah, that's a good amount. And who here knows what smart contracts are? Well, good amount as well. Who here has developed smart contracts for any platform other than EOS? EOS.io. Okay. Not only a couple. And who here has actually developed smart contracts on EOS.io? Nobody that I can see. Okay. So just for those who don't know, smart contracts are basically a piece of coding logic that lives on the blockchain. So you have code that gets deployed to a blockchain, and what that means is that as opposed to currency, like as many people are familiar with Bitcoin, that it just keeps track of balances. Deploying code to the blockchain allows people from outside the blockchain to call into the blockchain and execute functions for the smart contracts on the blockchain. And so what benefits does that offer as opposed to like a centralized server somewhere? The benefits are that putting it on the blockchain makes it tamper-proof. You know that what you deploy on there, people can read the code, people can know exactly what it's going to run. And also because it's decentralized, a person can't necessarily, a person who doesn't own the contract can't necessarily go in and change the code. And to actually hack it it's much more difficult than a centralized server where a lot of times you have the credential. I mean, if you get the credentials that you need to access the server in an unauthorized way, then you can basically potentially do anything you want, whereas on a blockchain that's much more difficult, it's much more secure. Also, it's deterministic, meaning when you have smart contracts living on the blockchain, when you run it, you know what the result's going to be. So you don't have to worry about unexpected results. You know that you're going to get what you expect to get when you run a function is what you're going to get. It's traceable, meaning you have a history of the changes of the smart contracts. You know what the previous balance might have been if you're curious. Just for like a currency contract, for example, or whatever you're storing on there, you can backtrack and see, what the values used to be, for example. And it's reliable. And that's one of the cool things about blockchain is that you have all these nodes working together to keep everything in sync, to keep, the blockchain, the ledger, and the smart contracts in sync. So if one node goes down, it doesn't affect all the other nodes. So it's very fault tolerant in that way. So without further ado, since we have our guests of honor here on web conference standing by, I'd like to introduce our first guest, which is Thomas Cox, who's the Vice President of Product at Block.one. Thomas finds ways to improve, optimize, and inform people of the EOS IO software product. He has a background in Oracle, IBM, and various startups. And he'll go into more details of EOS IO and fill us in on more of the different aspects of the software. So let me just switch to him.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Thomas.
Can you see me?
Not.
You're still sharing your screen. So you should probably end your screen share.
There we go.
Outstanding.
We can't see you as of yet, but we can hear you.
That's a start. Not quite sure how we're running this darn thing. I appear to be dialed in as a attendee on your event rather than as a panelist. If I am a panelist, I'm not.
Okay, I think you're a panelist. Okay, there we go.
It's magic. Oh my God. I can see myself in Austin. It's like I'm in two places at once.
Yeah, let me show you a wonderful audience, Thomas.
Please do. Wow. Wow. That is awesome.
Yeah, pretty big crowd.
Thank you very much. And we're coming through okay on audio? You guys hearing me okay?
You're coming in crystal clear.
Super. And loud enough? Is it loud enough?
It could be a little louder.
Is there any way to bump it either on your end or put the microphone next to the speaker or something, whatever the process is?
Let me take a look real quick. Try now.
2-2 testing 2-1-2. Thomas Cox coming to you live from Arlington, Virginia, attending a blockchain and government trade show.
Sounds much better. I think people are signaling that they can hear you now.
Super. Now let's find out whether you're glad you can hear me. Because the next step is for me to share with you this presentation, which is a bit of a backgrounder on what it means to do the kind of blockchain that we're creating and what it is that we're hoping to bring to you here on June 3rd when we go live. I'm required by our lawyers to read this out loud. I will be quick, but I have to read this out loud. And it is as follows. If I can find my mouse. EOS.io software will be a free product and development platform that all developers can use to develop, run, deploy, and govern decentralized applications. The ongoing EOS ERC20 token distribution is not and it's covered by some stuff. What's the word after not a? Oh, it's not open. To U.S. citizens, residents, or entities, and no information regarding the ongoing token distribution will be provided or discussed at this event. Nothing shown here is a promise or guarantee that a particular product feature will be developed within a particular time frame or even developed at all. Okay, now the lawyers have been placated. I will tell you the cool bits. As I believe everyone here knows, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Ubers, the Airbnbs of the world, the Googles, all run the same basic technology platform play, and that is a central server or a suite of servers that act as a single central server that sit in between value creators and value extractors and pull out profit both to pay for the server and to pay themselves. And that's just the way the world works right now. And there's a whole bunch of people following this, and some of them are very powerful and control a lot of our information, and their agenda is not always our agenda. And that is not because they are evil, wicked people, although perhaps some of them may be, but mostly it's because of a misalignment of interests. Specifically, the beneficiaries, the users of the system, have different interests, and the only thing that they have in common is they're fighting over the profit. There's no user vested interest in the health of the platform. And that is not the only way of being, it's not the only way of doing. It is also possible to do things in the way you see here. In 2014, Dan Larimer introduced the concept of a decentralized autonomous collaborative or corporation, in which an open source code platform unites the value creators and the value extractors. A token type system is the system through which they interact, and it is more transparent, it creates autonomy, it is trustworthy, and it is inclusive. And in this environment, what you will find is the beneficiaries and the users are highly, highly aligned. They can leverage a larger pool of innovation, it's open source, anyone can contribute, and there's an unprecedented level of vested interest. We're building on a legacy of multiple prior platforms that are running today. BitShares 1, BitShares 2.0, and now Steemit are three different projects that our product visionary Dan Larimer created. If you were to go to Blocktivity, the website, you would find that Steemit plus BitShares together are handling more distributed ledger transactions today than Bitcoin plus Ethereum combined. And they're doing it with far fewer computing resources. Got a solid background for this. In this kind of environment we're talking about, the tokens power the network in three different ways. They give you network access, you can use them to vote for block producers, and the network emissions, the inflation, pays for everything that happens. Specifically, these network emissions can be consumed in three ways. They can be destroyed, which reduces inflation and therefore preserves the value of the tokens that exist. Number two, they can be used to pay the block producers. And number three, they can be put into a budget for systems improvement. One of the worst things that happens to some blockchain projects is once they launch, there's no more financial incentive for people to continue to do development and support. And you've got to have ongoing development and support in order to have a healthy ecosystem to support developers. So we've got that covered with our network emissions. I'd like to show you a little bit about our systems architecture. You can view this as the EOS IO software system as having essentially 5 layers. And the first one is focused on the user experience. We have something, well, several things here, 2 of which I'll mention. Human readable account names. I have an account called TB Cox. As of now, of course, I also have an Ether address for my Ethereum account, which I wouldn't begin to recite to you because I think everyone there knows that Ethereum and Bitcoin addresses are extremely long random strings of letters and numbers. I'd like you to contemplate your grandmother trying to interact with somebody online using that approach, or you trying to support your grandmother over the phone as she tries to do that. It would be hideous. That's why that is a barrier to acceptance for production systems. So human readable account names are tremendously important. So is hacked account recovery. right now, the biggest exposure we have in the blockchain universe isn't the blockchains themselves get hacked, but that accounts get hacked. And if your account gets hacked or you lose the key, someone steals the key, then what happens? Well, in our past platforms like Steemit and in our current work with EOS.io, we have a facility for hacked account recovery. As soon as you discover your account is hacked, you can report that, your account can be frozen, and the account recovery process can begin. Tremendously important for people to feel comfortable and secure on the system. The second layer I want to talk about is the developer experience layer. The platform will only be as effective as, to the extent we can attract good apps and good developers to create good apps. And that means we need to focus on productivity. Things like having a declarative security model instead of a programmatic approach, and supporting dynamic account permissions. Those are just two of several things we're doing. Self-declaring interfaces, so you can simply inquire of the software and it'll explain to you what its interface is. Things that my friends who work on Solidity and Ethereum would really like to have. Important utility functions like contract freezing and contract replacing. Now, these can only be done through extraordinary measures. You can't just randomly freeze things on your own. But if, let's say, you've got the Parity wallet and you've just discovered that the Parity wallet is misbehaving, or the DAO hack is ongoing and millions of dollars are being sucked away, wouldn't it be lovely to be able to freeze that and once you find buggy code, replace it? Well, the blockchain is forever, right? It's persistent. You can't really change it, but you can build in facilities that allow the active code to be replaced and the active code to be frozen under certain circumstances, and that's built into our approach. Along with providing built-in data structures, you don't have to roll your own every time, and contract level governance so that you can have a governance layer for your distributed application. So you don't have to code absolutely everything. You can bump some things up to a level of human interaction. We have a constitution and manageability layer that includes things like appointing key roles via referenda, in particular the block producer role, very powerful role. Block producers are not chosen by hash power or by their own stake. They're chosen by the stakeholders based on how well they are pledging to produce blocks and then their track record on how well they produce blocks. And they can be fired if they misbehave. Rule changes and protocol upgrades also happen via referenda, and the voting for that is on the block. It's transparent, it's clear. And we have baked into the system a presumption of arbitration. A smart contract, if it's a contract, has an intention, but then it also has code. And in a less, I'll call it civilized environment, the code is the law, and if there's a bug, you should have seen it, then, buyer beware. And that's a really unpleasant environment for real humans to interact in. What we believe, and the guiding principle of our system, is that the intention of the contract should take precedence over execution, which means most of the time it'll execute the way we both intend and we're fine. And when the code departs from what we both intended, either one of us can raise an exception and say, hey, wait, I want somebody else involved. And we baked in arbitration to handle that case. You can have a third party get involved, look at the intention you both set, look at the actual outcome of the transaction, and then make a determination that will then be enforced. And lastly, security and consensus. This is what we mostly think of when we talk about blockchains, is the hard consensus that makes sure the blocks are valid cryptographically. Also, there's an important concept called soft consensus, where we don't have to all agree on something so much as the block producers have to agree on a few things, like what order will they run in. We don't fight for the right to make a block, we take turns. And that turn ordering is very important to be done correctly to reduce network latency. And that's something that only producers have to agree, but they do have to agree. There's a few classes of things that fall into that category. And of course, we use delegated proof of stake as our consensus mechanism. And what that gives us is very fast blocks, very secure blocks, with the new Byzantine fault-tolerant addition to our DPoS, which was just unveiled about a week ago. We believe we'll be able to provide not just 3-second blocks, but 3-second irreversible blocks. That's certainly the design goal. If you would like to be involved as a developer, if you'd like to be on the mailing list, if you'd like to get access to a test account and some test tokens, if you'd like to get support, we have a Telegram channel, and the best way to get started is to send an email to developers@block.one, block.one, and that's handled out of Hong Kong. And they're running 2 shifts now, so they do sleep occasionally, but they should be pretty quick to get back to you. I'm sure there's at least 2 or 3 questions since I went pretty fast. I'd like to take a few of those now, and I'd like to take a few others when we're done with the slideshow.
So does anyone have any questions?
So you're talking about arbitration being baked in the protocol. Can you talk more about that? Do you hear me?
Thomas, can you hear us?
Couldn't hear a thing. I think I heard the word arbitration.
Yeah, can you?
If you have someone stand next to the laptop and relay the question, that'd be super.
Can you hear me?
You gotta stand
No.
next to the laptop.
All right, we'll do that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. You said something about having arbitration baked into the protocol.
Right. Well, it's baked into the design philosophy of the platform. And so in addition to having code, we also have a constitution that every participant in the blockchain will sign. There'll be the constitution will be hashed, and you'll include a hash of the constitution in every transaction you submit. If you don't include it, you won't process your transaction. That's how we know you're agreeing to the constitution. And included in that are a couple of provisions, one of which is you will submit to arbitration disputes. And we're trying to normalize with all developers the idea that you should have a dispute resolution clause in there. As we wrap up to the June launch, we're talking to people who could be arbitrators, who would volunteer their services or offer them for sale. And every smart contract will by default go to block producers for arbitration if you haven't figured out something better to do, which you really should think of something better to do. I'll give you one example. You say have a suite of dApps around game playing, online games, and maybe you can, there's some cool distributed app you've got right on the blockchain around your game, and then someone says, hey, I'll sell you my suit of armor for that great sword of yours, and the deal goes sideways because one of you didn't really quite do what the other one thought they were going to do, and the code executed, but one of you's not happy. Ideally, you would have baked into your dApp an agreement that disputes in our game environment will be judged by one of our members. If you're familiar with a place called Open Bazaar, they're an existing blockchain shopping environment, and they've been doing this for a couple of years now, where your community figures out a way for your own members to judge each other's disputes because at least you know the game. You know the terms and the ideas. There's nothing worse than being judged by someone who doesn't even understand your context. So we're expecting that you will include in your contracts a mention of how you're going to handle your disputes in your community. If you don't, it'll get flipped up to whatever the next level of abstraction is. It's like local law and then state law and then federal law, right? If the locals haven't got anything that goes to state, if they state have nothing that goes to federal. And ultimately, everything gets judged by the block producers if it's not caught earlier, which of course it will be. And then arbitration is simply, you make your case, the other person makes their case. The arbitrator should be trained according to the international rules of arbitration, which we can point you to. They're very common. And then they make a ruling, and it's like a multi-sig wallet. And then 2 or 3 people can sign. And so you sign one way, your opponent signs the other way, and then the arbitrator signs it over to whichever one you want. It should be pretty straightforward. Remember that 99% of the time there's not going to be a dispute, but it's very important for people's confidence in the system that you not just say, well, maybe it looked buggy to you, but that's what the code says, so too bad. People don't want to play in that kind of environment. They'd much rather be able to plead their case to somebody and have someone do a ruling that listens to them. And we know that a blockchain for humans has to take the human factor into account, and arbitration is at the center of that philosophy. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I have a quick follow-up question. What does it take to change the rules of the Constitution that everybody has put in?
The changing the rules of the Constitution is it's a protocol change. And so typically what you do is you make a proposal, and then the block producers would vote in favor or against. And if 2/3 of block producers have a thumbs up for 30 days, then it's accepted and it's in. And then they'll schedule a particular block for the new rule to take effect. And that could be a change from 21 block producers to 37, change the rate of inflation cap from 5% to 5,000% if you want to be like Zimbabwe. Sorry. It could be any rule change at all. The vast majority of our code, we just did a refactor in December, January. And so we moved most of the actual behavior of the EOS platform out of C++ and into WebAssembly. So it's actually running as smart contracts on our platform, which means they're fully upgradable just like any other contract is, which is somehow cool and terrifying at the same time.
Cool. Thank you.
I'll take some more questions and then I'll relay them to Thomas here.
It's related to this.
Okay.
If you could just relay this to him.
Yes.
How do we know that a cartel won't be formed with these block producers? I think there's 21, and if it takes 2/3, how do we know they don't conspire, you know?
So Thomas, the question is, how do we know that a cartel won't be formed within the block producers? So there's 21, let's say 2/3 decide to do something.
Sure. Something wicked. So yeah, 2/3 would be 15. One of the things that a block producer has to do to even become a block producer is persuade enough of the token holders that they're trustworthy. So there'll be a bit of a competition there. And we're already having dialogue with potential block producers on what that might mean. Like, you might want to say, hey, I'll be a great block producer, and here's me and my face, and here's where my data center is, and here's my redundancies, and I'm not owned by any other entity, and I promise not to collude, and you might make other representations, some of which will be verifiable. And if you break any of those, you can probably expect that people would vote you out. At the first sign of a change that the token holders don't like by the block producers, remember, everything's transparent, everything's auditable. If you start seeing misbehavior on the part of block producers, or you have reason to suspect collusion, it is eminently possible to vote 2/3 of the block producers out in a single round. And we count the votes literally every round, which is roughly every minute. It's 21 times, it's every 63 seconds. So I'm not saying that it couldn't be done, and certainly if the majority of token holders are okay with this, whatever shenanigans are, well, at some point, you have to assume that the majority of the population is not corrupt, because if the majority is corrupt, your civilization is corrupt, it's time to fork the chain and go somewhere else. Let's just say we have pretty darn good multi-layered defense against block producer misbehavior, and I'd love to go into more detail with you on that, because I'm actually writing that paper right now.
Thank you.
But not today.
Okay, any other questions? Right here.
So you're obviously a high-ranking member of Block.one. What's the biggest problem you guys are facing right now?
So Thomas, you're a high-ranking member of Block.one. What's the biggest problem you guys are facing right now?
The fact that there's only so many days between now and June 3rd, because the tokens freeze on June 1st, and we've got 48 hours to launch the chain. So we have a very hard ship date. And I don't know if you've ever had a hard ship date, but there's no getting time back. And every long weekend, and every time we've kicked a problem into the following week, and we'll get to it later, we're all regretting it now. So that's probably the biggest one. Another thing is, most of our research and development is now being done in Blacksburg, Virginia, home of Virginia Tech. Go Hokies. And we are having We don't have quite as many really excellent developers as we need, and the window is kind of closing for adding more people to the project. I think most of you know if you add people late in a project, it makes it later because they're not up to speed. So yeah, I could wish that 4 or 5 months ago, we'd found a way to, I don't know, kidnap a bunch of C++ developers and smuggle them into Plattsburgh and brainwash them into staying. But you never have quite as many talented people as you'd like, and never quite as much time as you'd like. That's about it. We've got a ton of money. We've got an incredible vision. We've got, I think, a phenomenal architecture, and the community is responding tremendously. I'm already starting to see block explorers being created. Folks are working on porting new languages to compile to WebAssembly that will support. I kind of wish there was already a graphical IDE, integrated development environment. Maybe Willie's making one and I don't know about it. But in terms of getting the core code done, I actually feel really good about it. But ask me again in 2 months how I'm feeling.
Thanks, Thomas. Any other questions? Oh, right here.
So he just referenced that he has a ton of money, and a lot of that was funded months ago. So why didn't he just pay developers and attract them with all that money? I mean, I think they got almost like $700 million. I think you could get a few developers with that.
So Thomas, the question is, you guys have raised a lot of money already, probably close to $700 million, I think more actually. Over $1 billion, yeah. The question is, why haven't you guys months ago gotten those developer talents that you've needed?
And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying we don't have the talent we need. We have the talent we need. I just want more. We have a roadmap stretching out years into the future. Now, what we launch with on June 3rd will be tremendous, and I got big eyes. I know what else I want to do. We've got all kinds of features. If we had more people, we'd be working on stuff for release in 2020. I'd be working on it right now if I had extra people. It's okay. But your question is, why all that much money and why the timing? A lot of folks want to know, well, why don't you just, end the token distribution now? Don't you have enough money? Look, we have as much money as the community gives us. For all we know, these tokens could have been traded for 2 cents each, right? These could be Dogecoins. Who knows? If we have money, it's because people like you believe in us and believe in the project. All of the money that's been raised through the token distribution is going into, or all of it, most of it, I think, is going into venture capital funds to be used to pay for projects to develop distributed applications running on EOS.io. So that could be you. So if you're interested in that, you and your team should send a summary of your project to vc@block.one, please. That's vc@block.one. And the reason we're locked into the June 1st date, which is often a question, is because it's a smart contract on Ethereum, and it runs until it doesn't. You set it and it goes, and that's what it's doing.
Thanks, Thomas. Any other questions?
If you want to hear about a really cool distributed application, wait till you hear the next speaker.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So you're talking about you have a VC fund to fund these companies. What kind of applications would you like to see built?
Thomas, you guys have this VC fund to fund these companies. What kind of applications would you like to see built?
There is no limit to the number of applications or the types of applications we want to see. I mean, the sky's the limit. In fact, if you'd like to get in touch with me directly to bat some things around, because I really don't want to use up any more time and prevent the next speaker from coming on, feel free to email me, thomas.cox@block.one.
Thank you, Thomas. In the interest of saving time for the next speaker, we're going to continue with Sam Kazemian from Everipedia. But I want to say thank you very much to Thomas Cox for joining us. Thanks, Thomas, and we really appreciate you taking the time and for answering your questions and for informing us more about EOS.
Hey, thank you very much, and thank you all for coming out to this meetup. I know there's a lot of wonderful things you can do in the evening in Austin. It's a beautiful, beautiful town. You chose to be here. Thank you.
All right, guys. So I'm gonna switch it over now to our next speaker. So let me just make sure he is on. 1 second. Hey, looks like he's on. I see him. Okay. So real quick, our next speaker is Sam Kazemian, president of Everipedia. He's Everipedia is described as the online encyclopedia for the modern age. Their team has announced that they'll be integrating their platform with EOS.io, and they're going to be one of the first major EOS.io projects after the release. So without further ado, let me switch it to him. Sam, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Great, yeah, we can hear you and see you.
Awesome, very cool. Well, I'm really excited to be telling everyone what we're building and the EOS features we're using and why it is that we're building on EOS. So a lot of it'll build on Tom's talk, and a lot of what he said really resonated with me. So we're actually here in Los Angeles, so if anyone's in LA, love to hear from you guys. Come through, talk to us. And Everipedia is basically what we're trying to build is the first decentralized encyclopedia on the blockchain. And what I'd like to first say is what it's not. So what it's not is a normal website that just uses some tokens to incentivize people, or for example, an application that's fully built by some company such as Kick Messenger with in-game currency or something that's a cryptocurrency. What it is it's a fully decentralized encyclopedia and knowledge base where the token holders themselves are stakeholders in the entire Everipedia network. And that's really special, and that actually brings a lot of challenges to designing something like this. And part of the reason we're using EOS and we're really excited to develop on EOS is the different features that actually allow us to leverage and actually make this whole thing work. So just a quick rundown of what we're doing at Everipedia is essentially a 3 smart contract system in which there's a governance contract, a token contract, and information and article contract. And how it basically works is that there's an article contract that any contributor can submit information and edit to an article, or for example, a brand new article, an encyclopedic article. And once this is submitted, token holders can vote on whether it should be included in the database or not included in the database of basically human knowledge. And essentially, both the curators and the person proposing the edit, should it be approved, are given some minted tokens as an incentive layer. Very similar to kind of Steam's model for incentivization. And a lot of this stuff actually brings to light some interesting questions, right? We're asked a lot, what if a lot of people buy a lot of tokens to, hijack the platform and that kind of game theoretic stuff. And that's a lot of the things we're working on in the theory and building out this system. And we have a lot of good tools that we can use from EOS's basically Swiss Army knife set of tools, such as human readable account names that can be verified for identity. Other stuff that, for example, EOS protocol level arbitration over certain kinds of additions. And so we're really looking forward to leverage that kind of stuff and designing the theory, and when we output more information on how everything works. Additionally, Tom didn't talk about EOS storage, but what makes this really revolutionary, aside from the fully decentralized aspect of what we're trying to do at Everipedia, is that the actual articles themselves, the information people submit to this database, to the Everipedia network, is stored using the IPFS protocol, which EOS will have full native support for, and we're really looking forward to that. And what that essentially means is that anywhere in the world that there's EOS block producers, they can respond with these articles, and it's not just from one centralized data center or database in, AWS West region or AWS East. What that also means is anyone can run an IPFS node and actually download the articles that they want to host, so that they actually are allowed to serve up-to-date encyclopedic articles to anywhere in the world. This actually means that nothing can really be censored, because it can be responded to through any IPFS node. And these articles are up to date, and they're always listening for new changes being made, something that really wasn't possible before on Wikipedia or all of these knowledge-based sites, IMDb, Crunchbase, all the things that we're familiar with, where it's a big MySQL database running in some server, and basically the company runs it, and it's just there. It's very easy to block. It's very easy to censor. And so this is going to be truly the world's first knowledge base that is as decentralized as the Bitcoin and Ethereum and other blockchain networks itself. I just wanted to relay the current status of what it is we're building, and I like to take a oversized time for questions, because I think it's really it'd be really cool to actually get some kind of community response and community feedback. So right now we're actually building a EOS Ether relay code, which is going to be used for our airdrop. So as you guys might have heard, one of the ways that we're actually distributing Everipedia IQ tokens, the native token of the Everipedia network, is to EOS token holders using the EOS distribution list. And so this is really the first big project that's going to use this distribution method. So we're really excited to give it a go and get the EOS community fully on board with this kind of grand vision for a fully decentralized knowledge base. And so one thing we need to do is, when we airdrop these tokens, the EOS tokens are ERC20 tokens right now until June, like Tom was saying, when they'll be frozen and moved to the EOS mainnet. Our tokens will also be airdropped and be ERC20, which means there should be a generalized way in which tokens from the Ethereum network should be able to move over to the EOS network. And what we're coding right now is a fully generalized software protocol similar to BTC Relay. If you guys are familiar with that on the Ethereum network, which can verify, it's essentially a light client of Bitcoin on the Ethereum virtual machine that can verify Bitcoin transactions happen. We're essentially building that for EOS for checking Ethereum transactions. So that can basically allow people to move over Ethereum tokens to the EOS main network. That's really exciting, because it's not just for us. It'll be generalized software, and that's headed by our CTO, Travis Moore. And we're really excited to actually show people progress on that, because even though it's going to be used first by the Everipedia team, it's actually really important that we have software that allows migration of Ethereum projects to EOS, should people want to do that. And I think a lot of people will, once the actual features are laid out and this kind of avenue is made possible for a lot of blockchain projects. And yeah, I think that's it for a good rundown. I'd like to take a lot of questions, however much time you guys have. It'd be fantastic if we engage the community.
Sounds good, Sam. I think that's a great idea. Does anybody have any questions that I can relay to Sam? Over there.
Having gone through the process of building a website on EOS blockchain, what is it like interacting with
Having gone through the process of building a website on the EOS blockchain, what is it like interacting with it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we're heads down actually testing EOS code, and our CTO is writing a lot of the C++ code, and it's great actually. It's actually really impressive. So I wanted to give props to all of the tech team at EOS and Tom, and everyone's done a really great job for the second test network. I think we're at Dawn 2.0 right now. Everything is functional that they said it will be. So it's really impressive to actually deploy C++ code right now on our local environment. We haven't deployed anything to the main network, but everything works really well on our local environment. Other stuff is it's really well documented, so it's really easy, assuming you know C++ and some C, to really dig down and actually use the code that they provide and actually get some working examples. We're always really helpful to anyone that has questions. If you guys want to ask us anything, we're really fast at responding, either in terms of development questions, general Everipedia theory on how to build a good knowledge network. So if you wanted to join our Telegram at Everipedia and the EOS developers group, both of them are really big. We're always on there, so yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Any other questions for Sam? Over there.
Yeah, what are some of the lessons you learned from the Steemit platform as far as economic incentives for the curation of content that you're putting into what you're building?
So the question is, what are some of the lessons that you've learned from the Steemit platform as far as the curation of content? And the economic incentives.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the main difference between the Everipedia network and the Steem network is that we're not for pure blog posts and getting paid for blogging, which is a great idea, and I'm a big fan of Steem. What we're trying to do is create a consensus method in which token holders can come to agreement on some general knowledge about a topic. And that's actually extremely difficult to do. The theory behind how to do that is almost just as difficult as the theory behind what Dan is writing in terms of proposing blocks and block producers and actually having cycles for adding blocks to the blockchain. This is just as difficult of a game theory perspective as what a normal blockchain macroeconomic situations are and what those entail. So first of all, that's the big difference between Steem and Everipedia. The second thing is that we also have the same incentive model, right? So people will get some minted IQ tokens for giving proper information, and then also for curating and voting on whether this should be added to the network or not. So we do use, we basically have the Steemit model, but with a sophisticated layer of consensus for actually adding knowledge to the database, basically adding articles that are stored on IPFS and EOS.io storage, which makes use of the IPFS protocol. So it's essentially, just think of it as Steemit with the same incentive model, but with a layer of sophistication so people can actually come to consensus on what to add to a knowledge base.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. Another question over there?
Just a process question. Where are you going to find your devs?
The question is, Sam, where are you going to find your devs?
Yeah, so a lot of what Tom said does apply right now, is that there is a shortage of really good talent for a lot of this blockchain development stuff, because it's just gotten really popular. So you won't have anyone that actually has a formal education in crypto economics or crypto incentives. What you'll have are self-taught people who know how to develop code and can pick up crypto economics, and very, very few people have the complete package. So we're actually pretty lucky to have three very, very talented people working with us, and then I've actually been involved in mining and everything crypto for a few years, even before we started Everipedia. So we're a lot of bunch of veterans that know kind of what's going on, but we could always use more help. So if there's anyone that's really interested in tackling this problem of knowledge consensus and fully decentralized knowledge on a blockchain, we'd love to hear from you. There's definitely shortage of developers, but for our project, we're going pretty well. In fact, like I was saying with the EOS Ether relay, we're developing some general purpose software for the EOS main network as well. So that's going pretty well.
Cool. Any other questions for Sam? Oh, right there.
He mentioned that they were creating a protocol for kind of translating from Ethereum or ERC-20 over to EOS. Is that something that could be broadly applicable for, say, a distributed application that's been developed on Ethereum and says, wow, I like EOS better and I'd like to migrate over to that, kind of the way that Ken's trying to move over to Stellar?
Okay. Sam, the question is, with the whole migration process of the ERC-20 tokens to EOS, do you think that could be a process where it can be used by other dApps to, let's say they're on Ethereum right now and they feel like it would be nice or it would be better for them to be on EOS? Is that something that could be reused in that manner?
Yes, that's actually exactly, so you got that exactly right. That's the purpose that we're hoping this is going to be used for. Obviously, the first team that'll use it is Everipedia, and that's why we're developing it. But we're trying to develop it in a generalized software manner. And so if you look at BTC Relay on Ethereum, it has the same kinds of actual model of how it works, is that it basically is a light client. It checks the parent Merkle root as well as the block header roots of every block on the blockchain that it wants to be knowledgeable about, like what transactions are inside of those blocks. And so we're actually building that on EOS, but for Ethereum instead. And so what that allows is for the EOS blockchain to be cognizant in a completely trustless manner of what transactions happen in Ethereum. And so what that actually allows you to do is provably lock up your ERC-20 token on Ethereum so that it's provably locked forever. And so once the EOS chain sees that transaction, it'll credit you the same amount in the EOS main network. And so that's how a relay works. And so there's BTC Relay on Ethereum. We're doing an EOS Ether relay. And the whole idea is it should be generalized so that we can have any company or blockchain project actually use this and move over should they find it attractive.
Yeah, that would be very cool actually, because I know there's a lot of companies that, a lot of dApps that would benefit from moving to EOS.
Yeah, I think that really we'll see a lot more people considering it very, very quickly as it becomes almost painless to do. One thing is that, so the reason a lot of people ask about EOS token registration and all of these things is that since EOS is the main token of the network, actually getting a Genesis snapshot is fairly difficult, and I'm sure Tom knows all the intricacies to that as well, because you can't start a network and then have the relay be for the main network's token. It doesn't work that way. And so, but once the EOS network is live and people have their EOS tokens, it becomes fairly easy once the proper software is deployed to have these relays in which the EOS blockchain actually is aware of transactions that happen on the Ethereum blockchain. So people can actually use this and without having to code it themselves or reinvent the wheel. So that's actually really exciting for us too.
Cool. Another question here?
Could we hear a little bit more about his view of the need for Everipedia and the consensus given competitors and non-blockchain competitors and adoption? Is this going to be a small band of vigilantes who want to use this, or does he see the possibility of it being much broader than that?
Sam, the question is,
can you talk about the need for Everipedia and about the competition, blockchain and non-blockchain? Do you think it's going to be like maybe a certain niche of people, or is it going to be broader users?
Yeah, so we have a really big vision for what this is. We say it's the new generation Wikipedia with improvements in every single a category, from incentivization to decentralization to sustainability to self-governance. So we really believe that this is a bigger thing than Wikipedia, and that we're gonna build this out and then give it to the community of token holders. So the thing is that we won't have any substantial control of what happens to the Everipedia network after it's launched on EOS. The same way, for example, Vitalik doesn't have any substantial hard control over the Ethereum blockchain. People say it's a good social control because everyone respects him and he's the guy who founded it, for example, and he has the social, the social reputation, but he has no say in, what transactions happen on it or what gets put into blocks in any way. So we have a vision that this is basically something for the world, and we're going to launch it, and then it's going to belong to the token holders, and it'll be self-governed by everyone who participates in the network. So we obviously think this is how the sum total of human knowledge will be aggregated in the blockchain age, the post-internet age with blockchains. So definitely we see this not as just a niche project or something, but something as big as Ethereum, EOS, and all of them themselves. It's just that we're really excited to build it on EOS because we think it provides all of the features that we wouldn't have to build, and we can easily leverage the actual community and the security of the actual underlying blockchain itself.
Thanks, Sam. Any other questions? Oh, over there.
Have they spoken to Wikipedia? What do they think about this project? Because Wikipedia's kind of been struggling with their donation model.
Okay, interesting question. Sam, the question is, have you spoken with Wikipedia, and considering that they've been having trouble with their donation model?
Yeah, actually, well, we have one of the co-founders of Wikipedia who's actually on our team, Larry Sanger. He's the chief information officer, and he's working with us on the information theory and outreach in the community on this. So Larry was involved in literally founding Wikipedia in the early years, and he obviously knows a thing or two for setting the foundation for large projects that can grow and actually grow to be one of the biggest websites in the world, basically. He's working with us as CIO, and he's always on Telegram if anyone wants to talk with him and get his thoughts. And so we do have a lot of good experienced people with history at Wikipedia. We have an advisor who's previously worked there, and we were very aware of the previous generation things that we have to improve to really be at the forefront of basically the new age internet knowledge-based business. So it's definitely exciting, and we have a lot of experienced people with history at Wikipedia.
Thanks. Any other questions? Oh, one right here.
So highly speaking of EOS, this could be done on lots of different blockchains. What's let's say the top 3 reasons you really is so excited about EOS?
The question is, this project can be done on many different blockchains. What are the top 3 reasons that you guys are doing this on EOS?
Right. I think that it can definitely be done on next generational improvements on Ethereum, for example, perhaps like a plasma chain or something like that. But in Ethereum's current state, even though theoretically it can be done, it's simply not feasible. Imagine if you had to vote every time, you had to pay $1 for gas, and then you got compensated $1 every time. That doesn't really make any sense. So definitely next generation solutions. It can be built on a lot of different blockchains. I really think that EOS actually provides the best feature set for this next generation of blockchains with scaling solutions, as well as human readable account names, dispute resolution, all this stuff that Tom said is extremely attractive for people building really rich consumer decentralized applications. If you look at all the other blockchain competitors, so to speak, they don't actually have those features. They have other types of features. They all claim that they're fast, and I'm sure they are, but only EOS has these certain feature sets that make it very easy for people to build these next generation rich consumer applications. For example, whoever's going to build the next decentralized social network, next decentralized Facebook or something, is going to have to look and explore all these platforms and see what features that they provide and take a pick. And so I'm pretty confident that they'll pick EOS because of all these different features. It's really the prime platform for rich consumer applications. So maybe financial stuff, maybe Ethereum has like a leg up or something like that because of its more robust focus on more block producer consensus that anyone can produce blocks or things like that. But I don't think you'll see very many successful consumer applications, at least not anytime soon, on most other platforms.
Thanks, Sam. Any other questions? Oh, right here.
Yeah, I've got another question here. So the storage on EOS can't be delegated to other people. You can only store your own things, I believe. So who is going to pay for the storage on Everipedia?
Yeah, so part of the reason that we want to actually do this kind of decentralized storage and not just build this, website with like a MySQL database that's just incentivized with a token is because we want to build a fully decentralized knowledge base so anyone can take part in hosting it should they want to, and this thing can be completely kept up to date because it can listen for new IPFS hashes for edits of articles that are done and so on and so on. So to answer your question directly, at the beginning it'll be a smart contract that's deployed by the Everipedia team with EOS tokens in it, which will allocate storage to us. So originally, at the beginning, it'll be us. It'll be us that has these articles and will serve it for free, just like Wikipedia. We don't want to actually make people have to pay for viewing articles or anything like that, because that's pretty difficult to argue that it's better than previous generation solutions if immediately it seems like it's not. So originally it's going to be us, but the cool thing is it's a low-level protocol for coming to consensus on knowledge and adding it to the IPFS protocol, so people can build businesses on top of this. So should people want to have some kind of hosting solution that picks up the IPFS hashes that the Everipedia token holder community votes on in terms of updating the articles, they can run their own IPFS nodes and fund it in different ways, different business models that they see, and actually join the network. Similar to how like Bitcoin has a lot of different wallet explorers and block explorers, and some of them have ads, some of them only run on donations, some of them have none of that, but then, for example, have a wallet service where if you generate a wallet or something and you have transactions going through them, they'll take a small fee similar to exchanges. So it's really cool to see what people will build on top of it. And so it's basically a platform. It's not a private business. It's basically a protocol that anyone can basically take whatever parts that they want to. Maybe they'll want to build the front-end explorer to propose edits. Maybe they'll want to actually run an IPFS node. Maybe they'll want to be curators and content creators. Maybe they'll want to actually set up an API endpoint and actually add content programmatically that's hopefully will be really good and approved by the token holders. So the thing is, we don't actually have all the answers at the beginning, but what we want to build is lay the foundation so people can experiment and come up with really, really good ways in which this whole system will work in a sustainable way.
Cool. Question here?
And maybe I don't understand fully what you guys are doing. Would you see a project like Substratum as a competitor?
Yeah, the question is, would you see a project such as Substratum as a competitor?
Or you guys just focus on
I haven't really looked a lot at Substratum, but just cursory stuff that I've seen. I wouldn't really think so, because what we're trying to do, like I've said, is build a consensus protocol on coming to token holder consensus on knowledge, and then building the framework so anyone can host it and get updates on these on the updates of these articles in real time, basically, per block. And that itself is really valuable, and it'll be open source software, and the tokens will accrue value hopefully as this network picks up and it becomes the network for actually coming to consensus on human knowledge. So in fact, any website can pull from the IPFS database and use that data however they see fit, and basically getting your thing in this database and having a vote and say in how it's governed and earning more tokens by staking them will become very profitable, hopefully, once this whole network actually becomes very, very tangible, and it becomes an asset that other businesses use, and just like Bitcoin, basically.
Question here?
Yeah, you talk about the knowledge, the articles being distributed, decentralized on people's PCs. How will the network, know, okay, this article is on Joe's PC? Is there a centralized table of contents? How does that work?
So the question is, you have all these articles in a distributed or decentralized system. How does it work? Is there like a table of contents that says, this article is on, Joe's PC, or how does that work?
Yeah, so that kind of stuff, how people host the actual articles is, leverages the IPFS protocol, and so basically the TLDR is it uses a hash table, and the actual article gets hashed, outputs a unique hash of the entire article's blog, and basically when you submit a transaction for a vote, you're basically voting yes or no on the new state of the IPFS hash that gets replaced, that replaces the old state in the Everipedia network database. And so we'll actually explain that in good detail when we release white paper and more theory, and then the airdrop details of the snapshot data and stuff like that. But basically, we use previously, designed solutions that are still pretty early, but people are working on, like IPFS, to actually distribute out the hosting of the articles. So if you're wondering how, for example, IPFS does redundancy and make sure, for example, that someone's hosting the same files across many networks, that's a protocol question. That's actually a really interesting question, but that's something with IPFS I'd highly recommend checking it out. They have really, really interesting cryptography solutions to how to make sure the same files cryptographically are actually on these different computers.
Makes sense. Any other questions? Okay, Sam, looks like that's all the questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate, and was really excited to tell you guys what we're working on. If you're interested, join our Telegram. It's at Everipedia. We're always on there. I'm always on there. Larry and the rest of the team. So, yeah, thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
Thanks, Sam. It was great. I'll let you say goodbye to the audience here. All right. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Those were our guest speakers. I think we've learned a lot about, what they're trying to do, the details about what kind of stuff they're trying to do in terms of either, the whole blockchain of EOS or a particular dApp within it. So I want to quickly just kind of explain my experiences with EOS in terms of my background is a developer. That's mainly what I do. So I basically learned about EOS and decided that I want to learn a blockchain to code smart contracts for a blockchain that is quick, a blockchain where I don't have to basically wait minutes for a contract to be deployed on a mainnet or even on a test net. So what brought me into EOS, I was previously interested in Ethereum, but and other smart contract platforms, but I working with other ones and then seeing what EOS has to offer, I definitely found EOS to be the one that has a lot of compelling features, as was described by Thomas.
Just real quick, say what are your favorite couple features you like about it?
Yeah, sure. So I think what I like about it is that basically number one is the speed. It's definitely quicker to do everything. It's quicker to deploy. It's quicker to code. I downloaded a IDE to code the smart contracts, and it has the syntax highlighting and everything. So I don't have to deploy and see if something was wrong with the code.
So as a developer, it's pretty easy for you to jump into it?
Oh, so it took me about 2 to 3 weeks because I wasn't familiar with C++. If somebody's familiar with C++, they might be able to jump into it maybe a little quicker. But after 2 to 3 weeks, I was able to, pretty much code the major parts of that a smart contract entails. So I was able to deploy, do certain, create the functions that, manages balances.
Sure.
Actually, the two type of contracts that I built were a hello world and just a simple outputting or storing a string in a database. And the other type was like a simple or example ICO contract that's just for educational purposes. I'm not really using it, but but it gave me a lot of those features that I was looking for in terms of being able to accept a payment in EOS and being able to create a token and being able to transfer the tokens. So and so I like just how easy it is for a developer once you know the C++.
A couple weeks, 2 weeks to figure it out and jump in, that's pretty quick to be able to.
Yeah, that was my experience at least. Yeah. So like I said, if people know C++, it might be faster.
Are the libraries that go with EOS in their development environment really rich, or are you having to code up a lot of your own functionality that you wish they would have hardwired in?
So there's a lot of objects, or EOS has a library, its own library. So objects were created just for EOS, APIs were created just for EOS. That Block.one created them. Those developers working at Block.one created those APIs and libraries. But recently, Dan Larimer has mentioned that they're trying to introduce the standard C++ library as part of, as part of the smart contract language. It's not so easy because they have to be careful with what people can do with that library, because the standard library can do a lot of stuff. But that's what they're working toward. Right now, it's not in place. It might not be in place even in, well, I can't say when it's going to be in place because they didn't give a timeline, but they're working on that.
Did you ever, EOS is pretty much going to be like a more advanced version of BitShares. So did you ever use BitShares to program stuff on?
I heard that they took the code base of BitShares and to start with EOS.
Yeah, I mean you can clearly tell even from like the features and all the stuff
Right.
they're implementing in it. It's going to be the 3.0 or whatever .0 after BitShares. But I was just wondering, Have you
Yeah.
actually used it, because it does C++ as well.
Yeah, I haven't used it
So-
personally. Yeah, but yeah, I've heard it's EOS is based on that
Yeah,
code.
it's just kind of weird because, like, EOS has gotten, mad attention, but it's just like almost like a fork of BitShares, kind of, which got, kind of swept under the rug. So.
Right.
I was just kind of wondering if you'd ever use, I'm not a developer or anything, so I was just kind of I was trying to get more
Yeah,
insight,
although
like the technical part of it.
I would say, and I've heard this before, that if you're interested in EOS, look at BitShares, look what they've done, look at Steemit, look what they've
Does
done.
it still use graphene,
Yeah,
EOS?
that's a good question. I'm not sure.
I meant to ask Tom that, but, because I'm pretty sure it does, but maybe it doesn't, I don't know.
Yeah,
Speculating.
I'll have to check into that.
Okay.
Sorry, I heard my name.
Hey.
Hey, Thomas. You're still around.
I'm just watching the show,
I guess we can ask him real quick then.
Yeah. So, Thomas, do you know if EOS uses graphene?
Graphene was part of sort of the ancestral DNA. We looked at a bunch of open source things upstream, and of course Dan created graphene, so it's kind of inside him. So I think if you were to look at the code, you'd see the common ancestry, but we didn't just clone it, no.
Okay.
It asked me if they're going to integrate BitShares or Steemit in any form at all with EOS.
Thomas, do you know if they're going to integrate BitShares or Steemit in any way with EOS?
That's come up several times. Both BitShares and Steemit have their own, user base, their own governance, their own people who are sort of custodians of those platforms. And if they wanted to, port themselves onto EOS for any reason, they'd be very, very welcome to do so. It'd be some work, but they of course get some benefits. So I don't know if they will. They certainly could.
So is it more up to the BitShares Steemit community than anything else?
So is it more up to the BitShares and Steemit community more than anything else?
Absolutely. Same as if you had your own, environment running on a prior version of something, and you were like, well, there's this new thing, we could move ourselves over there if we wanted to.
Gotcha.
So Thomas, there are 20 main block producers that are always producing, and then there's the additional few. How many do you anticipate being in that remainder that are being cycled in?
Well, the exact rotation of block producers and standby producers is, we shifted our thinking a little bit. I actually sat down with Dan Larimer yesterday, Tuesday, and we talked about this. And the current design for the EOS release in June is to have 21 block producers with no rotation of the 21st seed. It's just 21 top vote getters. And then the next roughly 100 will be standby producers. And the block producers will get paid per block they produce. And then everybody who's both a producer or a standby producer will get paid from a parallel pot of money once a day based on their number of votes, which is an incentive to continue to campaign for votes. So that would pay you as a non-producing standby node. You'd get an income to pay for your equipment and the overhead of having staff and being ready to jump in as needed, and all the work you do at Verify.
So it's just I think it's a really clever idea and it makes sense. Can you hear me?
Oh, barely. You can get a little closer.
I'll speak into the computer.
Perfect.
There we go. So the question is that I guess I don't remember the term used, but that way of distributing the stake so that the proof of stake then have to authorize the block makers, which is interesting, and that's a good way of separating. But I guess the great question with stake or proof of stake, and I'm guessing it's with a lockup. Is that how you guys are doing the proof of stake?
Let me speak more generally to the way we're handling tokens around delegated proof of stake. Every token owner has the option to cast votes for block producers. You don't have to. If you do, the tokens you vote are locked up for the duration of the vote.
So how long is that?
6 months.
Okay, so here's my question, because this is the whole problem with all that, in my mind, a lot of this proof of stake. Essentially what it becomes is, it's not proof of stake, but it's proof of wealth. Because ultimately what you're saying to people is the more that you can afford to lock up, which means the more money that you're confident you'll never need for this entire 6 months. So that's not just wealth, but that's a heightened sense of wealth. You're rewarding that, and then it just becomes whoever has the most money has the most votes, you know?
They have the most votes, but they're not getting any income from those votes.
I'm not saying that, but then, well, that's not true, because what you said is if you vote for a winning, you just mentioned previously, that in the answer before, that if you become an elected one of these, you know, block awarders, or whatever term you use, then ultimately you will get a money return. So what you can do is you can do an exchange, and I understand that this is how democracy works.
You could vote for yourself, yeah. You could buy, 5 to 10% of the outstanding tokens and lock them all up.
Correct.
Or a bunch of them, and vote for yourself.
So then how does that not become proof of wealth as opposed to proof of stake? In that example.
You could choose to see it that way, I suppose. What, you have a point?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, of course I have a point, but I'm not trying to be adversarial. I'm just confused with a lot of the proof of stake when it becomes a proof, because I think it's not a semantical point of difference. Once it becomes proof of wealth, then ultimately we're just going back to a system where he or she has the most wealth, makes the most rules.
Yeah, yes and no. Bear in mind that being a block producer is rewarded, but being a block producer is also a position of significant responsibility and even some risk. One of the things that the other token holders are going to be voting on, and they don't have to vote for you, remember, is going to be, are you going to be a good block producer? I expect we're going to find that the people who get the most votes will be the ones who do things like place some of their own tokens at risk as a guarantee of good behavior, so that if they ever get booted off the block producer list, they'll lose some stake. Certainly when you guarantee a block, when it's your turn to make a block, you do put some tokens at risk in that process, and you can lose those. And so putting something at stake, yeah, you've got wealth, but you're also risking that wealth when you do things. And if you were to use your wealth to, buy the building that you live in, and then you do things to that building that make the building worse, well, dude, it's your building. I don't know why you're ruining your own home, but, you own it at that point, so I guess you get to do that.
Right, so, but in that example, that to me is real proof of stake, because what you're talking about then is, it's not necessarily wealth, but you rely, let's say in your example, you live in the house, for example. That's a real stake, because it's your home, right? So you have a commitment to it that supersedes your wealth, right? Even if you could afford to live in 20 different homes, you're not going to mess with your home because it's your home, it's real stake, it's not related on wealth. I guess the point that I'm making is, in the example you're making the second time, I think that's real stake. When if you think about, if you have developers and you're promoting developers to build on your platform, if they, for example, had a larger outsized vote, that's real stake, because these are these people's business. So it's not necessarily that they're wealthy, it's that this is my income, this is how my people accrue income. That to me is a different sense of stake, and that to me is a more powerful proof of stake. And it's not my idea, there are certain blockchains that are doing that. But if you incentivize the developers as much as someone who's just simply locked up money, to me that's real stake, because that's saying, why would I mess with EOS? This is my platform that I have my business on. Do you understand what I'm saying? That to me, that's a more substantial stake. Does that make sense?
Well, actually, I'd like you to broaden your thinking, because everybody who's got any investment in the platform has a stake in the success of the platform. And if you're a American or Korean, or obviously Americans can't buy tokens directly, but let's say you put a few $1,000s into EOS tokens, and then you vote them. Well, you're locked up for 6 months. If you're voting in ways that are harmful to the platform or selfish and don't actually contribute to the overall improvement of the entire community, why on earth are you doing that, dude? Seriously. I mean, you just invested a bunch of your wealth, as you pointed out, into a system much larger than you are. And we need people to cooperate, and we're incentivizing that cooperation. I would say if I had a whole bunch of money invested in the EOS platform as tokens, I would do everything in my power to attract as many developers and treat them as well as possible, have them bring in lots of users, and make it an extremely popular and widely used platform. So I think you'll find that the incentives are extremely well aligned here. And if it turns out that we've overlooked something, which we might have, I'm not promising that we're perfect, we also have the ability to amend the rules. And so if you, in fact, we have an ability right now to talk about them, and between now and June, make some tweaks, as well as after we go live. So if you got a specific proposal, dude, write it down and submit it, and start getting people to see things your way, and you might find that that gets adopted.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Is he talking about like presenting an idea and then recruiting developers to that idea? Is that what he's talking about?
So Thomas, did you hear that?
I don't know.
Not quite.
Hey Thomas, my name's Kyle Horn. Nice to meet you.
Hey, Kyle.
Hey, just a question for you. I'm more of like a business-minded person. I'm not a software developer, but I really see kind of where blockchain is going and kind of the vision, just worldwide. And so you say, hey, we have a VC fund. We're trying to get more development on our platform. And so someone like myself is more business-minded. Is how would I guess, obviously you have to do some research and come up with an idea, maybe make a couple developer friends, figure out an application, and then present it to the community, and then try to build developers around that idea? Is that what you're saying? I don't know, because I'm not a software developer, but I kind of see on the business side, like you could really, not to essentially on the money side, but you essentially have to put a team together to create.
Yeah, you're going to have to, the VCs are looking for business plans and business people and teams and ideas. Let me see, there was let me put this on screen here real quick if I'm allowed to. Yeah, it looks like I can. The others will stop screen sharing. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. So what you're seeing here on screen is forums.eosgo.io and the category opportunities. And so people are posting all sorts of requests up here for developers who are seeking projects or projects seeking developers, and so forth. This and the Telegram channel are two ways that people are finding each other.
Sure, okay.
So highly recommend you dive in. I got a couple of emails from people in the audience earlier today. As I'm sitting here, I got a LinkedIn request and I got an email. So there's people in the audience right now who are like looking for, they have projects and they're looking to build them out.
Sure. Yeah, my background, like I said, is sales and business, and so I'm.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna be very popular, man.
So that's what I've done. I did direct sales, like door to door and cold calling for like 5 years. That's my background. Just reach out and do stuff like that. So it's not blockchain specific, but I realize software developers, they need to also do. You need to put the team together.
They need someone who can do that for them because they're not going to do it themselves.
Correct. So I'm just trying to reach out to you and say, hey, this is kind of my thought process. Could you kind of just guide me down the path a little bit? So I appreciate that.
Excellent. Good for you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up here because we're over time. Thanks again, Thomas, for coming back on and answering questions. And so, as far as this meetup, if anybody wants to become involved, let me know. And if you guys want to become, anybody wants to become involved, just let me know, and we can work on it. So, thanks.
I would love to be able.